Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 89. Tough Love. War Baby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. On this episode of Murderous Minors, we take but the tiniest of glimpses into the utter craziness going on right now surrounding the troubled teen industry, which is a loose term describing programs that focus on altering children's behavior using harmful methods at the behest of their parents or the legal system. Religious gay conversion camps, some boarding schools, boot camps, and wilderness programs fall under this umbrella, as does any other program designed to change a child's behavior through harmful methods. Much of the time, parents have relinquished guardianship to such entities, making their child's abduction and transportation to their new home totally legal. Distressing themes in this episode, in addition to violence and murder, include child abuse, sexual assault, and attempts at suicide, so please be advised. If any of you watched The Sopranos, you may recall the memorable scene in Season 5 where Vito Jr. is snatched from his bed by men his mother paid, as she weepily apologizes. Viewers shake their heads thinking either she did what she had to do, or how could she do that to her child? But people are paid to forcibly remove individuals, including teenagers, from their beds, their homes, their lives, for a length of time to be determined by someone else. It's been a big industry in this country for decades, and just recently, the media has turned more attention to the plight of self-described survivors than they ever have in the past. Many of the teens who lived this experience are all grown up now and have found an outlet for their voices, thanks in part to celebrities like Paris Hilton and Kat Von D, who both attended Utah's Provo Canyon School as teenagers, as well as Paris Jackson, who said on Instagram that she also attended a behavior modification boarding school. All three women traced their PTSD and other issues directly back to their experiences at such institutions, which operated under the guise of a school, but which they say more closely resembled a lockdown facility. Another way that teens find themselves in these places is getting sent there by television's Dr. Phil. Back in 2016, season 15 of the show started with his interview with Burke Ramsey, brother of JonBenet, and while I was watching that, I saw a preview of the very next episode featuring Danielle Bregoli, the out-of-control 13-year-old who gained ridiculous notoriety for threatening people to catch her outside. Watching clips of her upcoming episode had my mouth agape, and it turns out that after she recorded her segment, she was sent directly to Utah to stay at Turnabout Ranch, a youth behavioral rehabilitation facility that is still recommended on the Dr. Phil website as I speak. In late 2017, after leaving Turnabout Ranch after 6 months and focusing on a rap career as Bad Baby, she spoke to Billboard magazine about her time there, and in early March 2021, she released a video online where she again addressed her stay at the facility. She described seeing lots of kids there who didn't deserve to be there and being subjected to freezing temperatures without proper clothing and protection. And once again, she talks about a murder that took place during her stay. It seems that on December 6, 2016, 17-year-old Clay Hitzen Brewer woke up feeling, quote, heartless. The previous night, the teenager from Snowflake, Arizona said he had drank bleach in an effort to take his own life. He just didn't want to be there or anywhere. By his own admission, his drug addiction was destroying his life. The baseball-loving boy was funny and always helpful as he was growing up. However, his parents' divorce upended him emotionally. Brewer's parents fought over custody of him, and in time, his mother remarried, and his step-uncle was the president of a place called Turnabout Ranch. His dependency on alcohol, chewing tobacco, marijuana, and prescription pills only grew once he turned 15. His mother would state later that, quote, "By the time I was aware of his drug use, he had advanced to cocaine and other illegal drugs." By the time he was 17, rehab seemed the logical solution to Brewer's parents, but instead of a certified medical detox and rehab facility, they looked to Turnabout Ranch. Their website states that, quote, "Turnabout Ranch is a year-round school that accepts students ages 13 through 17 who are struggling with a range of emotional and behavioral issues, including but not limited to depression, ADD and ADHD, substance abuse and addiction, defiance, rebellion, low self-esteem, and poor academic performance. Disqualifying characteristics are identified as, quote, "aggressive behaviors that could put other students or staff at risk, serious active eating disorder, active suicide attempts, sexual perpetrator behaviors, students whose psychotropic medication regimen is not stable, and psychotic behaviors." It's a working ranch complete with animals to care for, and according to the New York Times, the entire field of horse therapy began there in the late 1990s and spread out from south central Utah. They receive no funding from the government, nor are students ever placed there by the court. In fact, Clay Brewer's mother would later state that she paid a down payment of $15,000 and had an expected $21,000 bill remaining. Turnabout Ranch is set up into several distinct areas, with students moving on to the next after a designated length of time. New students start out at the section called Roundy and stay there for their first several days. This is where the, quote, "circle" is located, a large fire pit encircled by boulders, and here the teens are expected to sit all day in silence, regardless of the weather, and contemplate how they'd gotten to this point in their lives. According to his mother, once Brewer arrived at the ranch, he wasn't allowed to wear shoes. Food was scarce and there was no running water. And even though it was December, the teens were forced to remain outside from early morning until bedtime. Showers, pillows, and mattresses needed to be earned. The day after arriving in Escalante, Utah, Brewer was suicidal. He would later tell police, and by his 4th day at Turnabout Ranch, he was suffering physically from opioid withdrawals and emotionally regarding feelings of abandonment by his family. He told police later that he felt betrayed and he decided he was going to make a run for it. Brewer told a fellow student named Matthew about his plan to leave the ranch, and at first it seemed he planned to go along. And then, in what he described as an attempt to take his own life, Brewer drank bleach that night but woke up the next day knowing that his addiction had taken over his life and that it controlled him. As was customary in the early mornings at the ranch, teens would start a fire in the circle and, as Brewer would describe later, make their breakfast over the flame in a tin can with a wooden spoon. On this morning, December 6, 2016, Brewer had made his decision. He was leaving Turnabout Ranch however he could. After the teens started the morning chores, they sat around the circle where the fire burned. This is where they were when night shift employee 61-year-old James Woolsey came to check on them. Jimmy, the married father of a 10-year-old daughter, had lived around Garfield County, Utah his whole life and was well known and loved, including at Turnabout Ranch. Both Danielle Bregoli and Clay Brewer said things like he was a great guy and was one of the few there who, quote, "gave a fuck." A true outdoorsman to the core, Jimmy Woolsey had worked at the ranch for roughly 5 years. On that morning, around 7:30 a.m., he approached the two teens sitting at the circle and was walking away from Brewer when he pulled out a piece of metal rebar they used to poke the fire and began striking Jimmy in the head 10 times in total. His cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. Matthew had run inside the cabin where 4 campers and employee Alicia Keller were. Brewer next appeared there as well in search of a way to escape. He had tried to move Jimmy's body to conceal it, however ended up covering him with his sleeping bag instead. According to Alicia Keller's statement to police, Jimmy had gone outside to check on the boys while she stayed in the cabin with the girls during what they called reflection. Jimmy never came back, however Matthew came into the cabin with Alicia and the girls and he was acting weird. When she asked him why, he told her that Brewer had hit Jimmy. She went outside and saw the boy's sleeping bag over the man's body and knew that there was nothing she could do for him. Alicia was immediately bombarded with blows from the metal bar Brewer was wielding and was barely able to make it back inside the cabin, though she couldn't get the door closed all the way. Through the cracked open door, Brewer struck Alicia Keller's hands and head, leaving her with injuries from which she would recover but that would disable her. He threatened to kill them and told them he just wanted to escape. He briefly went back to Jimmy's body and took his wallet and the keys to his truck, which he couldn't get to start. Brewer went back to the cabin and was telling them he was going to break in and kill everyone inside. Alicia was able to negotiate with him, saying she would give him her keys if he would stop hurting people. And he grabbed her keys and took off in her car, heading toward the town of Escalante, Utah, about 3 miles away. At this point, it was 7:35 a.m. on a Tuesday, a typically busy time on the streets of any sized town or city. Tiny Escalante in south-central Utah was no different, and as kids were heading off to school and their parents off to work, Clay Brewer was driving the stolen car at more than 65 miles per hour on residential streets. The sheriff would later describe how the mayor of Escalante and his wife were almost struck by the fleeing vehicle. Police ultimately used bumper-to-bumper contact to bring the ordeal to an end. The teen had gotten less than 5 miles away. The pit maneuver sent Brewer into a tree, after which the vehicle rolled. He tried to fumble around and gesture with his hands as though he had a gun, telling police later that he had wanted them to shoot him. But instead, he was arrested at the scene and charged with 3 first-degree felonies, aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, and aggravated robbery, 1 third-degree felony, failing to respond to an officer's command, and 4 misdemeanors. Brewer was automatically charged as an adult per Utah law. He told police that, quote, "Of course when you're coming off drugs and tobacco like I was, you lose your mind. That's where I was at. I lost my mind." In July 2018, Clay Brewer pleaded guilty, apologizing and making a statement that included advising parents to keep their prescription medications far from where their teens can get them, saying, quote, "It's a matter of time before they are found and abused potentially by a young child who has no knowledge of these demons that are pressed inside those pills." The then 19-year-old spoke next about his daily regret and how his murderous act affected the other students with him that day at Turnabout Ranch. He said that he often thought of Alicia Keller, the staff member he beat and seriously injured, hoping she was able to heal and live a happy life. Brewer spoke of praying daily for Jimmy's widow, Brenda, addressing her in his statement saying, quote, "I really pray that one day I can meet you and say this to your face and apologize from the bottom of my soul, and you may accept my apology not because of my words but how I lived my life after taking yours." Brenda Woolsey read from a letter directed to Brewer at his sentencing saying, quote, "I ask that you receive the same sentence you gave me, to be alone." On October 11, 2018, Clay Hickson Brewer was sentenced to 5 years to life for murdering James Woolsey and 1 to 15 years for the attempted murder of Alicia Keller. Less than 2 months later, Brenda Woolsey filed a lawsuit.